When my daughter was a baby, she was a terrible sleeper. I spent many early morning hours trying to find advice online from research, experts, and parents in similar situations. But as surely as there was any piece of potentially helpful advice, there existed its polar opposite. Keep the baby near you so it can form a healthy attachment, one expert article might read. Let the baby soothe itself or it will never be independent, read the next. I sometimes feel like the baby sleep debate is similar to the teacher feedback one. When it comes to this absolutely vital issue, one that plagues teachers and often drives them out of the profession, why can't research provide a more solid answer? I feel like one book calls for one approach, and then the next, another, and the next, and the next. Here's the thing, baby sleep and giving feedback on student writing have something in common. They're complex, they're individual, and they're so difficult that many people have tried to offer creative solutions. So instead of lamenting all these often frustratingly different possible approaches anymore, I decided to go hunting for treasure. Today on the podcast, I'm sharing my distillation of the feedback landscape. Ideas to keep in mind as you approach the feedback process so that you can help students as much as possible while sparing yourself unnecessary angst as much as possible. Because when it comes down to it, I think it's way more important that your students get to have you as a healthy, creative, energized teacher than it is for them to get an acre of feedback on their writing. Ready? Welcome to the Spark Creativity Teacher Podcast, a podcast for English teachers looking for more creativity, more engagement, more joy, and no more scripted curriculum, lesson planning ruts, or boring book lists. I'm Betsy Potash, and I'm honored you're trusting me to help. You're not alone on this creative journey anymore. Principle number 1, be positive and grade less. Everyone who has ever assigned writing knows that many, or maybe most, students don't think of themselves as writers. Actually, they think of writing as an intimidating, even frightening thing. It's sad. You can help them rewrite their own writerly narrative by giving them a lot of opportunities to write in class that don't lead to a grade. Chances to experiment and develop their skills and identity as writers. And when you do grade their work, you can sincerely compliment the areas that they're doing well in, which helps reinforce those skills. If you're already feeling guilty about not giving students more grades, consider these thoughts from Alfie Kohn from his foreword to the book Ungrading. Quote, grading has 3 predictable effects: less interest in learning, a preference for easier tasks, and shallower thinking. Principle number 2, mark selections and best work. Along the same lines as you build a culture of regular writing in class, you can let your students choose what to have you grade. Sometimes it may be one paragraph of a narrative. Maybe it's the paragraph where they feel like they really nailed whatever you happen to be working on that week. Or maybe it's one daily practice from a series of 10, the one they feel was best. The idea is that they can get a check-in with you on work that really deserves feedback instead of a check-in on everything. In their book Best Practice, Zemmelman and Hyde weigh in. Quote, research strongly shows that the traditional intensive marking of student papers doesn't promote improvement. Instead, a brief conference or marking a sample paragraph for just one type of problem results in more real learning. Principle number 3, be targeted and specific. Once you are holding their selection, their chosen best work, or the culmination of some real process of writing, keep in mind that it doesn't make sense to comment on things you haven't worked on yet in class. If you're working on analyzing evidence, for example, and before that you worked on arguable thesis statements, then comment on those things, reinforcing the positive and giving a clear next step if your students have a little further to go. But don't, I repeat, don't, get into long comments on the side about things like transitions, counter arguments, making their conclusion more interesting, etc. Chances are you aren't going to be able to write enough to really teach these concepts in the margin, and your students may be more confused than helped by commentary that doesn't directly follow up on the things you've already taught. In his wonderful book on teaching narrative writing, George Hillocks Jr. writes, quote, "I always recommend focused, positive, short comments related to previous teaching for these grade levels and for high school students. If I have not taught the skill or concept related to my comment, I try not to make it." Research analysis from Edutopia on feedback reinforces this same idea. Quote, "Focus on providing less feedback that's more targeted. In a large-scale 2020 meta-analysis, researchers found that too much feedback is often ignored, misunderstood, and of low value to students. The best feedback helps students understand not only what mistakes they made, but also why they made these mistakes and what they can do to avoid them the next time." Principle number 4, conference if you can. Conferencing is not going to be practical with every piece of writing, but if you can build it in during a couple of your major writing units, it sure does make an impact. Carl Anderson's book, How's It Going?, presents the writer's workshop model of conferencing if you're not sure where to get started. Like so many aspects of teaching, setting up a successful context for conferencing does take a lot of intentional planning. Principle number 5, use peer and self-revision. Peer and self-revision can be major players in your feedback process, and this can save you from exhaustion while also helping students improve their writing and even their understanding of what's required a great deal when done right. The key is to provide a clear structure for revision. Things like exemplars, checklists of what to look for, rubrics that show levels of needed elements, demonstrations from you on how to improve a weak area in a piece of writing. All of these different things will help make the peer and self-revision processes more powerful. Principle number 6, give feedback first. Many teachers are understandably frustrated when they see their comments land in the trash after passing back work. Consider an easy switch up, giving students your comments before you give them their grade. You might have them write down their plan for the next piece of writing based on your feedback. You might have them show you this plan or turn in this plan with their next piece of writing so you can see that they've followed up on your advice. Consider the research study from Edutopia that I just mentioned earlier. Quote, "In a 2021 study, students who saw their grades first, followed by feedback a few days later, scored 2/3 of a letter grade lower than their peers who received feedback first." That's a pretty significant shift if you think about it, when we let students focus on feedback first instead of immediately sending their eyes straight to the grade. Finally, number 7, track the plan. Let's say you write an argument paper with your students at the end of the first quarter. Then you move into book clubs, you do a podcasting project, you do a poetry unit, maybe a little more short argument practice to circle back, but mainly a lot of creative writing and other types of writing. Then you get to Q3 and you do another argument paper. Are your students going to remember the advice you gave them on their argument paper back in October? No, not a chance. They are definitely going to need help with that. That help could look a lot of different ways. They could have a chart glued into their notebooks with the types of writing for the year written across the top and boxes where they can add the key feedback they get from each piece of writing throughout the year so they can always be moving forward. Or maybe it could look like a Google Doc shared between you and them where they can put in their plan after each piece of writing and you can both see it. Or it could look like a survey they fill in after their writing, which you give to them and they give back to you with their next writing project. There are lots of options. Keep in mind, this is only going to work if students really understand the feedback they've been given. In his book, Making Learning Whole, David Perkins shows the problems with giving margin feedback students misunderstand, and then expecting them to improve based on tracking that feedback. In my interpretation, that means feedback really needs to follow up on course content so it's easy for students to understand. Remember, we already talked about this back in number 3. Be targeted and specific. Okay, my friend, those are the 7 feedback principles that I see throughout my reading, throughout my research. These things surface and resurface. Number 1, be positive and grade less. Number 2, mark selections and best work. Number 3, be targeted and specific. Number 4, conference if you can. Number 5, use peer and self-revision. Number 6, give feedback first. And number 7, track the plan. If your school is still pressuring you to copy edit every student's work, spending half an hour with every paper and giving exhaustive feedback in the comments, see if you can start a conversation about how your team can give the best possible feedback in a more doable way. Don't be afraid to be your own advocate. The research lines up with not being exhaustive with your feedback, and hopefully that means it doesn't have to be so exhausting for you. Thanks so much for joining me today. Until next time, take care of yourself and stay creative.